Hi, I'm Professor Mary Bauer from Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. This is the first in a series of videos I'm doing to help students who are trying to write essays and research papers, and we all know that can be quite a challenge. Today we're going to focus on the thesis statement, which is really the core of any academic paper. You have to decide what it is you're going to prove before you can construct a really good proof for everybody. The first step, though it seems kind of silly, is that you have to do some serious thinking. If you're going to be spending time writing a paper, shouldn't it be about something that interests you? So think about what intrigues you in whichever class you've been involved with. You may, for example, want to focus on a particular issue, such as the civil rights movement. Or perhaps there's a person you find fascinating. Joan of Arc is a great example. If you're in a psychology or sociology class, you might think about writing on a particular technique, such as the use of music to help children with mental health issues. Once you've decided what you want to invest your time on, now it's time to sort of test the waters and see if there's enough data out there that you really can write a paper. So this is just preliminary research. You want to see if there are good sources out there and if there's enough data. Wikipedia might be a good place to just get some background general information, but this is not information that you can use in an academic paper because it's not peer-reviewed, it's not edited, it's not tested. You have to be careful as well in using blogs. If the author is an expert, such as, say, a medical doctor who's writing about an illness that she treats, yes, she's an expert and her opinion is authoritative. But if you're writing, for example, about how to raise children, the blog of a wife and mother is not admissible as academic evidence. The opposite problem is that when you begin looking, you find so much data that it's overwhelming and you don't even know where to start. This could be you. If that's the case, I would suggest that you try finding another topic. Once you begin doing just a little bit of research, you have to narrow down your topic. The civil rights movement is very broad, for example, so you want to pick a theme or some aspect of that topic that interests you. So, for example, if you're working on the civil rights movement, you might find it interesting that certain civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., advocated the use of nonviolent resistance. You might say, I want to take a look at that. I want to see how effective it was, whether it lasted, what kind of a response it had, what kind of criticism others had against it. If you're writing about a person, you might think about one aspect of that person's life and how they had an impact. For example, Joan of Arc was a 16-year-old girl with no military experience when she went into battle. You might want to take a look at what effect she had and how that compared with the other military leaders of her time. Once you have enough information to start sorting through, you now have to take a specific position. Yes, it's interesting that Joan went into battle with no military experience, but so what? What are you going to convince your audience of? So you have to convert this theme of yours into a very specific position statement. Looking at the issue of the nonviolent resistance in the civil rights movement, here is an example. I'm looking at the respect that they gained and how they won over other people who were in the civil rights movement who said, you're wrong, we have to use violence. With Joan of Arc, I found that her lack of battle experience actually allowed her to come up with new strategies that other military leaders didn't think of because they'd always done things the same old way. Now we have to test the thesis to see if it might be workable or whether we might have a problem with it. My first test is to insert the phrase, I'm going to prove that, in front of my thesis statement. You're not actually going to write this on the page, but you're just going to see if it works. Then you have to ask yourself, does it pass the so what test? Something may be true and it may be provable, but if it's something that everybody knows, who cares? Another test is to make sure that you have just one provable point. If you have more than one point in your thesis statement, technically you have to prove each of your provable points, and that could get pretty hard to handle. You also have to ask yourself if you can come up with at least 3 or 4 examples to prove this point. You might have a lot of data, but if not all of your data relates to your specific theme, you could run into trouble when you start writing your paper. The opposite problem is if you have so many examples that it's hard to choose, you've probably not narrowed down your topic enough. So let's take a look at some examples and see if we can figure out what's wrong with them. Abraham Lincoln's role in the abolition of slavery. If I try to insert, I'm going to prove that, let's see if that works. I'm going to prove that Abraham Lincoln's role in the abolition of slavery. No, that doesn't work. I didn't take a position, and I don't even have a complete sentence. We have to throw this one out. Here's another one. The Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia in 1968. I'm going to prove that the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia in 1968. Yes, I can prove that. Does it pass the so what test? This is a little tricky. It is historically really important, but for you to prove that is really not very significant because it's already very well known. So you're proving a well-known historical fact. That really doesn't work. I'm going to prove that diplomats, industrialists, clergy, journalists, and even private citizens helped to protect the Jewish people during the Holocaust. Yes, I think I could prove that, but boy do I have an armload. Can you imagine trying to list every one of those and trying to come up with 3 or 4 proofs that every category listed here really did help to protect the Jewish people during the Holocaust? I think I've bitten off more than I can chew. Joan of Arc wasn't a tomboy, but ultimately she was put to death for wearing men's clothing. Okay, I'm going to prove that Joan of Arc wasn't a tomboy. I could probably prove that. Does it pass the so what test? Well, I think it's interesting, but is it really something I want to write a whole paper about? Could I really find 3 to 4 examples to prove this? Probably not. I could probably find 1 historical case, but I'm probably not going to be able to write a whole paper about this. So hopefully now you have a general idea of what you need to do, and shortly I'll be posting another video on how to construct the anatomy of your essay or research paper. Thanks for listening.